I guess that we can start.
Okay. So, hi everyone. So this is the DRIP working group that Med is I'm sharing with Med. If you haven't seen the Notwell since the beginning of the IETF, I would be a little bit surprised, but it's part of the rules. So if you have any questions, just come back to the chairs or any person from any chairs or any AD, and we'll be happy to respond to your question. So I guess you know the rules, but so if you're using, I mean, we ask you to use Mitico to go into the line, even though you're in person. So you have to click to go into the queue of the Mitico so that everyone knows who you are, who is speaking, who is asking a question. Usually we ask you not to use the video, but if you, if you're speaking not on site, remotely, then you can use the video. Otherwise, if you don't speak, make sure the audio is mute. If you want to speak, it's really recommended that you have some headsets. So that's going to make your your words more comprehensible for everyone. So this is the current agenda for today. So we have a little bit of this is the introduction, and then we have some administrivia, which is how we liaise with other organizations to get some SAM code points. I guess Stu is probably going to clarify that for us. Then we have some active document the working group is focused on now. And just for a reminder, the one we're putting all our effort is the authentication draft. And then we have the registries. So these two are, the main focus of the working group. Then we will have a point from Andre on what are the implementation, the current implementation. So Andre and Adam. And then closing, we will close that session with anything you want to say. Is there anything that anyone is willing to raise anything regarding this agenda? So document status, we have 2 documents that are at the ISG. We're basically waiting for the authentication draft to be completed so that we are sure the 3 drafts are coherent between each other. We expect that to be done relatively soon. So
yeah, Daniel, just for the previous slide, please, if you can just as mentioned in the slide, so we have there was a lot of work which was done for the DRIP architecture and the READ specification. So there's a lot of discussions that we received during the ESG review that were resolved. And as an outcome of that discussion, there's another individual draft that was edited in the APSIC working group, and it is now sponsored by Roman. So Bob, if you can just give us an update of the other draft, which is sponsored by Roman. Do you think that this will be progressed along the READ? Bob? Yeah. Okay, so that one is there. So for the authentication, so this is not mentioned in the slide. So this is the second working group last call we have for this document. We used to have the first one. We received a fair amount of comments. There was some commitment during the previous IETF meeting for people to review. We didn't receive the 4 people that committed to do that, but we received at least, if I remember, 2 or 3 of them. And then we launched the second working group last call. There was major modification in the specifications. We hope to see more eyes on this document. So far, we only have the working group chairs who review the document, and we are doing it as a courtesy for the working group, but we would love to see more eyes on this one. So please, even if the working group is closed, there is time so that you can share your comments on this one before we decide to send it to our ED. So we also requested the early directorate reviews. Two of them are really positive. The one about the gene art and the security directorate. The one I was hoping to see was from the operational directorate, because there's a lot of aspects there about the provisioning which are important. We didn't receive any news from them. We contacted them so that they can send us the review, but we didn't hear from them. So please get into this document and share with us any comment you have. So Daniel, please.
Okay, so do we want to make a call of people committing to review?
I think that's the no need to have commitment for this one,
Okay.
but I think that the message is shared. So let's hope to see some more. Yeah.
Okay, right. So these are the milestones. So yeah, the authentication is sent to the ISG 2 months ago. So we need to make sure that it happens by the end of the year. So this is why it is important that we get some additional reviews, so we're confident we're going to reach that goal. And same for registries. We would like that to be sent by the end of the year. I guess we will have some AD words, but well, the idea is basically that all the work will be done by the next IETF. That's we don't want to meet for the next IETF. I think that should be the message. But now I'm maybe giving the floor to Eric.
Yeah, so Eric giving the responsibility for this. Just wanted to say a few words in addition to the email sent by the chairs of end of September. As you know, the ARC and RID are approved, so congratulations for changing and going through everything. I know addressing this case takes time. Thank you on this. I am waiting, like we said, that all progress to be sure that are all in sync, because we need to be coherent. So good news. For the ARCH, I will request another IETF-wide last call, because there's been two important changes to it that are not editorial, right? In section 4.2.3, there's been added blockchain in addition to DNS, so which is a major change. And the other one, another major change, was replacing DNS over TLS, which provides only privacy, by DNSSEC that provides authenticity and integrity, right? So that's major change. So we request another last call on this. I don't expect anything bad. For RID, by the way, I will need to send an email on the mailing list, because I saw that in section 5, when we do the reverse DNS, the canonical format is not used. So two IPv6 addresses or hit can end up in the same name, which is, of course, not really what we want. Anyway, detail. And I think we will talk and get some news about the code points that are in OAuth, right? I'm not sure we can go and progress to the IG without those code points. And we may need to do some document surgery or whatever. I'm there to help, but I'm kind of helpless though on this one.
Yeah, just one more question, Eric, about the IETF last call that you plan to issue for the Arch. When do you think that will happen?
Oh, it will. I mean, it will happen. Whatever happens to OAuth, if OAuth progress, right, within 1 month or 2 months, I will ship together, because it's easier for the people doing the review, right? Okay. Getting the Arch simply for this, for their leisure, let's say, for their comfort. If nothing moves on OAuth and REG, which I think is a bad scenario, I will move those two forward, okay. OAuth and REG.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so
Yes, yeah, this slide is a focus on the registries. So as you know, there is a proposal to split the content of the current registries we have into various spaces so that people can easily digest and also grasp the specification. It is really, I would say, for me, it's a good restructure of the content. Is really more important for, I would say, to structure this aspect. But it is up to the working group to decide whether we maintain the current structure or we go to this current proposal. If we go for the split, there is the, I would say, two questions arise there, is that we need to make sure that what we'll put in this document are fully aligned with our DRIP ARCH document. And this is something that I think it is today, but the editors need to be aware about this and not deviate from what we have agreed so far. And the other point that we'll discuss also during the slot of registration is we need to decide where to send the other documents because they don't belong to the DRIP working group. So there is some, I would say, some logistics to be figured out, and we will discuss that during the addendum slots. There is a third point which is really procedural, but we will depend on we'll need an approval from Eric, is to change the status track of the registration from proposed standard into informational. But this is something that we can discuss. Daniel?
Okay. So ASTM ICAO contact. So we send an email and to contact those organizations. But I think Adam or Stu did some follow-up. So I think it might clarify where we are and what are the next steps to be done.
Yes. So Daniel, can you please share the slides of Stu's slides?
Yeah,
because I cannot
I'm
do
trying
it when you
to.
are sharing.
Okay. So.
So I'm basically going to talk about things external to IETF that drive or otherwise interact with our work.
No.
So I don't have the slides for ASTM. Did you have some specific ones?
Yeah, I had just like 3 slides, which I had uploaded, and I think Med has approved them.
Yes. Yeah.
So if you can pull them from the data tracker or whatever.
Okay. Because I have the implementation. I have.
There's one called externalities.
The one I just showed. No, I don't. I can't see those.
Well, I'll start talking while he looks.
Yeah.
So I'm going to grab my own laptop as notes. Okay, so there's essentially 3 externalities. There are what are the regulators are up to, and what are the other standards development organizations up to, and what are the early adopters doing. So we've had several interactions between the regulators and the external standards development organizations that have affected DRIP since IETF114. In July, ASTM published F3411-22A. It explicitly acknowledges DRIP in the section that talks about session IDs. There used to be 3 types of IDs. Now there's 4. The 4th type is called a specific session ID. It has 2 subtypes. Subtype 1 is listed as the IETF Drone Remote Identification Protocol Identifier. And the F3586 means of compliance document was submitted by ASTM to FAA. So this only affects the United States, but it describes how F3411-22A can be used to satisfy the FAA regulations. And that was mostly approved by the FAA, but they added a couple of additional requirements. In August, the FAA said, yeah, we like that means of compliance, but you need to have tamper resistance. And there's a lot of pain surrounding that one. The reason being, how do you do tamper resistance with something that can be sold profitably for $49 at Walmart? In September, unmanned aircraft system manufacturers began filing declarations of compliance based upon that means of compliance standard and the notice of availability thereof. I filed a comment. Now, I normally don't use the first person singular pronoun in a context like this, but I made it very clear that I was speaking for Stu Card, but informed by work with my employer, IETF DRIP, the Air Force, blah, blah, blah. And pointed out that if you run the DRIP extensions to ASTM F3411, you're going to have a private key store on board the aircraft. And if you have tamper reactive hardware, you can simply wipe that. And that will achieve the FAA's purpose more effectively and at a lower cost than putting the thing in a titanium can. Also in October, representatives of the FAA agreed with the need for authentication, which goes beyond F3411, requires, you know, what we're doing in DRIP or what the IEEE is doing is the other specific session ID subtype. They unofficially expressed their appreciation of what we're doing in DRIP. DRIP really needs participation from folks outside the United States. You'll notice the whole first half of this slide is what's going on with the FAA, and many of you shouldn't care what's going on with the FAA. So we really need some help from you folks outside the US. We're going to need probably a means of compliance addendum or something like that, showing how to use DRIP in addition to ASTM F3411 to more fully satisfy the requirements. Because as I mentioned, when the FAA said, yeah, we like the ASTM thing, it was with a yeah, but you have to do these additional things. Presumably our basic DRIP document set consisting of requirements, architecture, the identifier, which is Bob's RID draft, the authentication formats and protocols, which is Adam's major draft, and at least the architecture of the registries if we go ahead with that restructuring. Interestingly, there are folks with really urgent needs for remote ID. And so before we have FAA or any other CAA's blessing of any RFCs, or indeed any RFCs actually beyond the requirements, which is the only one's been published so far, DTN working group is considering whether our HITs fit their node and endpoint identifier needs for at least some cases. And some US agencies, which I am not at liberty to name, but they are big ones with a lot of money and a lot of aircraft, are conducting field trials that are intended to rapidly become actual deployments of DRIP. Daniel, could you put up the next slide, please? Okay, how do these drive our work? Well, the ASTM document and the rules of the different CAAs already drove our requirements, which drove our architecture, which is really closing in on publication as an RFC, which then points to and introduces the identifier, the authentication formats and protocols, and whatever our registry's document structure proves to be. And I'll leave that to Adam to talk about. Next slide, if you would, please, Daniel. Okay, so some other interactions. Somebody in IETF, I'm not sure who, not sure whether it's IESG or IAB, wants points of contact from ICAO and IASTM to make sure that this whole thing isn't just Bob and me ranting. And they are willing in principle to, to provide those points of contact. ICAO wants what they call an observer, which is actually a full participant but with no voting rights in their new trust framework panel, which is for all of aviation, unmanned aircraft, manned aircraft, airline operation centers, air traffic control towers, the whole 9 yards, right? They've already adopted a variant of the DRIP entity tag as one of their identifier formats. So Bob and Stu are already on a panel, and the first meeting will be in Montreal, and we really need somebody to represent IETF or IETF DRIP, not Bob, not me. ASTM wants ICAO to act as the registrar for remote ID types and code assignments. Fortunately, our DRIP entity ID is already burned right into the standards document itself. And it's been said that when this registry is stood up, entry number 1 will be DRIP. And then the specific authentication methods, there's going to be several subtypes, and we need at least 3. But there's no process yet in place to register those. Each of these organizations has procedures for establishing official liaisons, but those procedures take time, and we're not so much trying to establish, ongoing broad organizational relationships. We're trying to address the specific issue of getting our SAM codes. And so ASTM has drafted a letter, which is still in ASTM legal review, that's going to go to ICAO to officially request that ICAO be the registrar for that. ICAO has unofficially said yes already. As soon as those documents are mutually signed so that there is a registrar, we will immediately file our registration paperwork with them. We've had to identify some informal interim points of contact. So Adam for DRIP, because the authentication draft is where those SAM codes get used. Saulo da Silva, who's a very highly placed individual at ICAO headquarters, and Gabriel Cox, who chaired the ASTM working group that developed the remote ID standard F3411. To identify an appropriate DNS apex, we've been talking with the appropriate people. And to identify an appropriate IP prefix, we've been mostly talking amongst ourselves, but informed by the assignments that were previously made for HIP and HIP v2. So anyway, to summarize, even though DRIP drafts are mostly drafts and not yet RFCs, we've already got enormous momentum beyond the IETF. I mean, there are people who are sending these things into the field based upon the drafts.
Please wait for the question from Eric. Yeah, Eric, please.
Yeah, just please stay there. For the first line, right, just to clarify a little bit, maybe that's a little bit fuzzy. There's the IETF in general. The IEB is in charge of all the liaison, right? This is the thing. And typically the ISG will require in the evaluation that all those check has been done. So you get all the pieces together. Somewhere we say it's formal. Yeah, we have a process, but it's simply an email in the case of the IETF IEB. So you can say, hey, Eric, blah, blah, that's enough, right? So very simple stuff.
Yeah.
Right, and we do in fact have emails from Saulo da Silva saying, yes, I will serve for now as the ICAO's point of contact with IETF. And we got an email from Gabriel Cox saying, yes, I will serve as ASTM remote ID workgroup contact with IETF.
Yeah, before, can you just please send it to the chairs, because we have contacted these people and we've received any reply from them. So if you can just forward them, that will be really cool. We have a record.
Yeah, I'll ping them again.
Yeah, and also to answer to the first point you have in the slides, it's us as a chairs who try to get these liaisons, because we have a problem with the authentication draft. If we don't have allocations, we cannot send them to Eric. So that's a real problem in the process if you want to have interoperability, and we need to fix this. Anyway, so Jim, please.
Yeah, Jim Reed, just a random bozo on this particular bus. I think the points that were made earlier are quite valid, Stu, that we probably don't need to have a formal liaison relationship set up between the IETF and these other organisations. Perhaps, as you say, a non-voting subject matter expert, say a designated IETF expert to potentially serve that committee. And I think something as simple as Eric appointing a stuckey would probably be the best mechanism for that. And let's not get too tied down the idea of setting up a formal liaison channel. That might be something for further down the line if there's going to be a long-term relationship there.
Thank you, Jim. Eric?
Yeah, Eric Zink again. And actually, to partially answer you, but you answer yourself to what you said. So we don't need, there are two steps for liaison. Liaison manager, which is some guy which is there for many years and handles everything. We have there for 3GPP, IEEE. It's not the case here. I don't think so. So simply liaison statements. It's simply an email that is kept forever in one specific place in the web. That's it.
Yeah, I don't think we would have that discussion if they would answer to our email. This is my view. I mean, we're not trying to build something heavy. Actually, we just want to get, yes, we agree on that. Yes, we will have those points. But currently, when we're trying to contact them with an email, we don't get any response. We haven't seen any response. So,
well, I'd rather not. show this in the meeting notes or anything, but one of those guys had a very recent change of employment, which has muddled things a little bit. And the other one just defended his PhD, which has kept him rather busy. But I'll ping him again.
Just one final point on this, Jim Reid again. Whoever is going to serve in that trusted, that framework panel thing you were talking about before, is they will not be speaking for the IETF or representing the IETF. They're just someone from the IETF who can advise and give information.
Yeah. Just one final question before we wrap up on this one. You have mentioned that the ICAO are planning to answer to the ESTM about their plan to host the registry. Do you have an idea about the scheduling, or is this something which?
Well, I told them I wanted it before today, and they said I'll hopefully get it in December.
December. Okay. If it's December, it's fine. Okay. Thank you, Stu, for.
But this is really blocking.
Yeah. Thank you, Stu. We can move to the next slide, please.
Okay, so let me try to.
Yeah. Okay.
I already have slides, Dan, already up, thanks to Med. So you should be
Okay.
good. All right, so I'm going to attempt to blitz through the small stuff, and then we have discussion. Where do I point this? Here? There?
That's what?
I click, nothing happens. It is sad. Okay, well, I think Med did that. Useless. Okay, so just a quick update to touch back on that. ASTM and ICAO are working through the process to set up the registry for the code points for the SAM types. The formal letter is to be sent. I contacted Gabriel earlier in the week. It's through their legal processing, so it will be going out of ASTM soon to get to ICAO. Once ICAO gives the official confirmation, they should be ready, and we can just send the email through Eric or Med or Daniel to ICAO requesting what they need to be like, are you going to give us code points? A simple yes, and then we can move forward. And those are the 4 code points we're looking for: link, wrapper, manifest, and frame. And as Stu said, we at least need the first 3. So on the working group last call for authentication, there was no substantive reviews. Med has put some issues on GitHub for me, so thanks, Med. I'm going to be working on those at the end of this week, beginning of next week. So there should be a -27 pushed out, hopefully by the end of next week after I've recovered from traveling from London. Next slide. All right, so we're going to talk about the hackathon very quickly. Next slide. It was really successful. I had a good discussion with the LIU students from Andre. They were all remote. We found some issues. I did a very quick just interrupt bash. Things seem to be working, just barring a few nits. They're going to be working on the changes hopefully during the week. So maybe Andre will give some updates on that at the end of the meeting. We had 2 physical attendees, Philip and Marius. They produced the first open source implementation of endorsements, which is part of the registry draft. So, and that will hopefully end up on the working group GitHub. I'm going to have to talk to Med about how that's going to work, but there's a fork through there, and that will be lovely. So thanks to both Philip and Marius for their work Saturday and Sunday. We presented a hack demo happy hour and showed it off, and it was working with my closed source implementation. All right, so right into the registries. You can just 1, 2. Next slide. Okay, so the current status was the registry document has kind of sat since 1.14. I did, I think, a small update push right at the end or right after, but there was a general agreement of a concept in 1.14, but it wasn't formal of doing a split as we've been discussing, but a dry run was requested. So I split the documents, threw them in an email, threw them to the mailing list. Nothing happened, I think, for like a month. I waited, and then Bob said, drafts are free. Put them in the data tracker under a personal draft. So I threw them in as personal drafts into the working group. There were no comments from either set of pushes other than I think Bob +1ing it very early on. My live prototype is fast tracking these documents. It's live on the internet, it's using DNS, it's doing all of its good things. So I want to focus today solely on the discussion of this, splitting of the documents and get consensus now. Next slide. So this image is probably familiar to you from 114. It's a bit parsed down and not as wordy and has color this time. So this is the general architecture, the DETM architecture, and each one of those arrows represents a draft that is currently pushed. There are 5 documents: the DETM architecture, the DPA HTTP document, the registry HTTP document, the registry EPP document, and the DIA RDAP document. And you can see on this image where they're located in the whole architecture stack. Next slide. So the DETM Arch is the primary document that's going to, I think, affect the working group. It replaces the registry document that we have now. It goes from standard to informational. Maybe, I'm not quite sure. We're going to have to talk to Eric and get working group consensus on it. But it's the primary architecture for the registration and lookup. It rips all of the implementation details out and says these are in other drafts. We just talk high level models, roles, components for the system. That is it. Next slide. As I said, it's a copy of the registry's document with the following changes. The terminology, I can confirm, lines up with the current version of architecture. It happened at the end of work 14. I made sure that everything was lined up. If it isn't lined up, it's maybe one word here, one word there that just missed a control, find, replace, if that's what I did. There were some additional sections explaining the logical components added. I updated the attestation to endorsement. Again, the changes for definitions. It's also been moved to the main body. Implementation details have been ripped out. We may need to tweak text here and there that might be broken based on that, but for the most part, it read fairly cleanly, at least to me. And then there was a new IANA registry put in for some value stuff for registration data per some comments from Stu. Now, overall, this makes it easier to parse and modularize, as Med said earlier. So I, as the author and I believe the editor of the document, believe that this is a great move because it was a hard time in 114 with the guys from Info Networks. It was so much, it was a fire hose to them and they just couldn't grok anything. And it took hours and hours and hours to get them up to speed. And that was just horrible. So hopefully this fixes a lot of the problems. Let's go to the next slide. So this is the next biggest important draft that probably stays in the working group. It's the DRIP provisioning agent document, and it's the, if we looked back at the previous diagram, which you don't have to go back to, we might go back to later, it was the red arrow. And this is just the interface between clients and the DIME. Inputs, the formatting, all that good stuff. I hope that this working group document gets adopted, or the document gets adopted by the working group, but if we have to focus on DETM alone, that's fine. Next slide. Same thing with the DIA HTTP. This is another document that defines a interface for the RDDS. It's currently HTTP based. It could be other things that may depend on DNS technologies and where exactly we're deploying. Again, another document that I hope would be adopted because it's, I think, a core, but it isn't the pressing issue. The pressing issue is the architecture. Next slide. Finally, the documents to move to the working group. These are the ones that I'm not really sure where they go. The registry to HTTP, DIA RDAP, and registry EPP. They seem to be better suited into the registry extension working group, but it's an argument of, do we give it to them and they work on it and I travel with the documents to give guidance for the use case and they are the primary authors, or we leave them here and bring primary authors to here. I'm not quite sure how this is handled and where the work lives, so we'll probably have to discuss this. Next slide. All right, so these are just some open issues that are left. the apex of the DNS tree, as Stu pointed out. Encryption key management, which is kind of a stretch goal in a way. It ties into Bob's personal draft on operator privacy, which has expired. But I know based on my work, that's the next big item I have to work on implementation wise. Serial numbers for non-DRIP participants. This is something that's been knocked around by the authors a little bit. And then finally, endorsement, just definitions. They're in JSON right now, which is terrible. I'm going to convert them to CDDL. So this is more just an action item for me and to remember. Next slide. Okay, so this is the discussion. So those are the big major questions. Do we proceed with this restructure? Do we have any problem with the names and the scopes? How do we adopt Dedham Arch if we're going to? Is it just a rename of the registry's document? Is it just a push of the registry's document with the content completely changed? I don't know. Personally, I don't care as long as we agree to what we want to do and what makes life easier for everyone. And then finally, what documents stay. So I open the floor to anyone and everyone to give their opinions and their input. Hopefully we can reach consensus by the end of the hour.
Bob Moskowitz. Adam, from the slides, it's not clear to me where you put the endorsement evidence definitions.
The endorsement definitions are in the DETM architecture. So the architecture document, it is section 8, I believe, of the personal document. And that's where they're defined, the structures are defined, and just generally what goes in the evidence. What goes in evidence is defined in other documents.
The actual formats, though.
The formats, though, are defined in the DRIP, the DETM architecture.
Okay. I may have a little bit of problem of how much information is in the architecture, other than saying these things exist. But in terms of the definition of content, that may be problematic having that in architecture. I'll have to look and review it, be careful here, because that may be getting a little bit too much detail in architecture.
So the only thing where there's well-defined what's in the evidence is the predefined structures that we have selected: self-endorsements, broadcast endorsements, concise endorsements. That's the only thing that's very specific in that document, but everything else gets kicked out.
Yeah, defining what they are and why they are belongs in architecture.
And that is there now.
Okay, defining their content, what's in them, even just describing the elements, all that belongs
Elsewhere.
elsewhere.
Okay. That's
my view of it.
That's fine with me, as long as we find the home for the pieces.
Yeah. Jim Reid back again to claim that I'm just speaking for myself. In general, I think this is a great step forward, and breaking down the existing documents along the lines you suggested, Adam, is a good idea. It's much more modular, it's easier to understand, and it's easier to figure out how the bits are going to try to fit together. So I think going down this way is probably the right thing for the working group to do. The other comment I had to do was about the potential for an EPP extension. I think we should do this work here, because we'll be better placed to, I know what the requirements might be, and then eventually when we've got something that's reasonably well baked, chuck it across the road to the regex group to ask them for any final comments. But since all we're going to likely be doing is adding another piece of XML to the schema, I don't think there'll be a big problem there.
I figured as such, but floating the ideas up.
Eric Vink, SDAD. I'm afraid I will paraphrase or repeat what Jim said. Indeed, it looks like it's better format and easier to swallow, so cool. And for the extension to EPP, specifically it's only an XML extension, state here.
Right.
The only thing we will do, the working group last call, forward it to the regex.
Okay. And I think it's important because the architecture document was, well, the original registry document was so big, so convoluted that we had everyone, me, Bob, Stu, everyone had a hard time deconflating things. We kept putting things in buckets that we shouldn't have, and I think this will clear it. So now it's just like we thought, oh, EPP, we have to change everything. Now we can.
Yeah. The only point I would make as a chair is that we cannot, I would say, carry all these pieces in parallel because of the limitation of the resources we have. So and I need to discuss this with Daniel. We are not planning to adopt any other document rather than the DIM architecture itself, so that we can have something which is really, I would say, stable. And then if we have sufficient energy in the working group to work in the other pieces, we will not kick them, but not in parallel.
That is fine with me. I have no issue with that.
Next.
Hi, AJ Beal, Naval Postgraduate School. Just kind of looking through the architecture and the mailing list repo that's there. There's not really a specification. There is some RF link that advertises this. And I don't think it belongs in the architecture to specify it, but I was wondering if the the FCC or equivalent international bodies have said what RF frequency this would advertise on.
Okay, so Stu's laughing. That is not defined here. It is defined in ASTM. Oh, yes, FAA defined it and then ASTM used it. Yes, that's true. Correct. Yeah, so it's FAA side. FAA said it has to work on. Why don't you answer that? Because I'm going to fumble and just drown and it will be sad.
Right.
Yeah, go.
Well, the architecture says someone on a cell phone picks it up. That's a.
Yeah, where this came from is that the FAA's Aviation Rulemaking Committee strongly recommended, and the FAA adopted, that any media to be used for this should be license-free media that are readily available to any citizen. ASTM then said that means Bluetooth 4, Bluetooth 5, Wi-Fi neighbor awareness networking, and 802.11 beacon, and others as we may add later.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, if you want more context or whatever, find the two of us and we will talk your ear off till the end of time. Oh boy. Alcohol will just make it slurred and nasty.
Okay, so we can wrap up. Okay, so unless there is any objection, we will proceed with this plan. So it is time to speak. Once, second. Okay. Thank you, Alan.
All right, I will get with the two of you, Eric and Med. I will get with you directly after this. Let me know what I need to do. If I have to submit whatever you want, let me know, and I will push it through probably either later tonight or Friday, so that it's done before we even leave London.
Okay, thank you, Alan.
All right, thank you, guys.
Andre, you're next.
Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Good. So I'm happy to present experiment update on behalf of myself and our students at Linköping University, Sweden. Next slide, please. We have implemented this reference architecture, which is partly compatible with what DRIP is doing at the moment in terms of broadcasting messages from the drone and receiving it at the application. And we also have alternative implementation of a registry now, which is based on blockchain, which might be something interesting for a working group in the future if we have energy to specify it and maybe put it in a separate draft. But next, please. So as Adam mentioned, we had very nice preparation for this IETF in terms of testing our mutual implementations. Ours open source, Adam's is proprietary. So we had also some success in hackathon in the Sunday to identify some issues between our different implementations in our Android phone and also in the DRIP broadcast. So mostly they are compatible, but we identified some issues which are now being resolved. So I think it was very nice. And thanks, Adam, for joining the hackathon. Next, please. As you know, Bluetooth 4 is currently mostly used, but it has limited range. And Bluetooth 5 can provide reception up to like 1 kilometer from a flying drone. So we are working on also adding Bluetooth 5 support, which is a bit challenging in Raspberry Pi 4 because some drivers are not so up to date. So we also tried some external dongles that we can connect and then try to add this support. And also in Bluetooth 5 in so-called new unit of computing, which is Intel, which we already like operating and testing, but Raspberry Pi is still in progress. Next, please. And our application for Android for receiving DRIP data is in progress also. So we used OpenDrone ID as a starting point, but the problem, it was requiring Google API key, which is requiring credit card and so on. So we could not really publish ready packages. But now we switched to the OpenStreetMaps version, which is free. So now we have on the DRIP application page, we have ready APK, and also we are in progress to publish as a Google Play app, which fortunately requires a lot of questions and answers and still in progress, but we hope to finish it within a few days. Thanks. Next. Next slide, please. So as a hardware, we used the Phantom 4 drone as a starting point with Raspberry Pi 4, and then with battery on the left side, as well as a GPS receiver. So we just put it all together, and then, as always, when you start doing things, you discover some funny stuff. Like, for example, the magnet in the antenna was completely messing up the drone system, so we had to actually remove it. But if you put the next slide, we actually got it flying, as you see on the left, the Phantom drone in a bag carrying the complete DRIP operational transmitter, which has GPS support and Bluetooth 4 and Wi-Fi. And as you see on the application, you can get the data about the host identity tag of a drone and also the coordinates. And on the right-hand side, you can see our backend, which is again not compatible with current registry draft, but it's like what we produced. So it's some kind of registry where you can register drone ID, the public key, and so on, which can be used like remote queries to see like what is the public key of a drone, and then verify the drone identity. And actually, it's backward compatible with current standard, which is not secure drone ID, because it's kind of based on it. Next, please. Our next experiment area was using this so-called new unit of computing, which is basically a normal PC, but it's like small factor. And it's 86 architecture, which makes it a bit easier because Raspberry Pi is ARM based, so it's easier to get like more up-to-date drivers on this this Nuke device. And as you see here on the Matrix DJI drone, it actually integrates fully with a drone in terms of API, so it gets a power from a drone, GPS data, and other stuff. So it's a bit less hardware, let's say, than using Raspberry Pi on Phantom. Also has 5G modem on the top. And nice thing about this Nuke, it has Bluetooth 4, 5, Wi-Fi, so we could all test that together. Next slide. So we had this nice big public demo event in Sweden by Wallenberg Foundation, where we could fly this drone and actually test the range of ID that we could think. At that time, we had only Bluetooth 4 available, so we could have less than 200 meters range. But as I mentioned in other tests, in Bluetooth 5, we could have about a kilometer, so which is much better. And as well, we contributed to Open Drone ID, a patch developed by Intel to have GPS support for them, and check that we are kind of backward compatible so that we can have both secure and insecure drone ID received on the same app and same device. So it's working well. Next slide. Also, we were analyzing this DRIP protocol with a tool called Tamarin for any errors in security specification. And well, in generally, we found that DRIP protocol is well secure, except we identified some risk for replay attacks, which we plan to communicate to draft coffers to see if there is anything that we need to fix. But in general, I guess it's a good sort of support for protocol going forward. As we know, with TLS latest version, we had also full verification with Tamarin. Next, please. And as we know, DRIP is using a host identity protocol for generating IDs, and we are supporting open source implementation of it. So there is patches needed to implement latest draft, such as hierarchical heat support, new crypto like Hudiak, and so on. And also we lately implemented Docker support so that it's easy to, for example, test on a Mac device or any other Windows or other device that doesn't have full Linux support. So welcome to download it and try on your own device. Next. So one of the challenges we had is that now there is new OpenSSL 3.0, and the old SSL 1.1.1 is going to be deprecated in a year, which was pretty big change in OpenHIP code. So we had to change many things, and the current status is that the code is compiling, but it's still pre-alpha, so it needs more testing and more verification. But since it's kind of priority thing due to deprecation, I hope we'll get it done before the new year. And we also like testing night traversal and some other stuff which might be useful for DRIP as well. So that's it. If you have any questions or comments, we'll be happy to take it.
Any question for Andre? You have to add yourself to the queue and then just click on it. I have one for you before to get to the mic. Yeah, so you have mentioned for the last one that there is something that can be, I would say, broken for that part. Is there something that can be, I would say, fixed, or this is not something that you have in mind so far?
Well, to fix replay attacks, you need some kind of freshness and nonces. And well, if a drone just, let's say, broadcast HIT, it's not so hard to just record it and broadcast it somewhere else, right? So you need some kind of maybe query report protocol. It's Adam had this picture in his slides about sending a message, but nobody can reply to it, right? So it's same kind of thing.
Yeah, so you can just okay. Daniel, we don't hear you.
Andre, Stu here. The formal analysis that you're undertaking, is that on the protocol or on the implementation?
It's mostly on the protocol. So we tried, as you see in this picture, to follow the protocol as close to as possible, including all their drafts and the registries and so on. So it's protocol, yes.
So I understand the replay attack being mostly inherent to the use of broadcast.
Yeah, it's just because anybody can record HIT and public key and then send it somewhere else, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right, but probably I'm up with my time, so thanks.
Thank you, Andrew.
And still grew really good gray bird for this IETF.
Thank you, Andre. So now we are the last part of the open mic. I don't know if you have any comments or any questions to the chairs or the ED or for the working group in general. You can get to the mic. Okay, if there is no comment, I think that we can adjourn here. So thank you for attending, and see you next time in the next DRIP session. And thank you all for your work.